The elegant clinking of crystal glasses echoed through the opulent dining hall, the sounds like a symphony of indulgence and wealth. Waiters, dressed in crisp white uniforms, floated between tables, their movements graceful, almost choreographed. Silver trays, polished to perfection, were balanced on their palms, each one holding culinary masterpieces that seemed too beautiful to touch, let alone eat. The lighting was soft, casting a golden glow over everything, luxury in its purest form. This was no ordinary restaurant. This was Le Royale, the city's most prestigious establishment, where only the elite could dine, and only the fortunate could afford the lavish experience. Amid the glamour, the door swung open, and a man appeared at the entrance. He moved with purpose, but with a hesitation that seemed out of place in such an environment. His coat, though neat and tailored, showed signs of wear. The fabric frayed slightly at the cuffs, a detail not easily overlooked in this crowd of perfectly dressed patrons. A cane tapped the marble floor with rhythmic precision as he cautiously made his way forward. The room fell silent. The chatter of the patrons dwindled, and heads turned in unison, their curious and judgmental gazes locking onto him. He was different, and that difference was impossible to ignore. This was Ethan Harper, a man who had once commanded respect on battlefields far from the luxuries of cities like this. But now, he was a blind veteran, a man whose presence in this world of grandeur was both unsettling and intriguing. As he reached the maitre d', the tension in the room grew palpable. "Sir, can I help you?" the maitre d' asked, his tone polite but hesitant, unsure of how to address a man who seemed so out of place. Ethan's lips curled into a faint smile. He tilted his head slightly, as if listening to the vibrations of the space. "Yes, I have a reservation," he replied, his voice steady, calm, and humble. The room buzzed. "A blind man? Here, at Le Royale?" The whispers rippled through the air, but no one could guess what was about to unfold. Ethan Harper had not always been blind. Once he was a soldier, a decorated officer, who led his team through the most perilous of missions with unwavering courage and honor. He had been trained for combat, for survival, and for leadership. He was a man who could command a room with a single glance or a well-placed word. His life was full of purpose, and every mission he undertook reaffirmed his belief in his strength and ability to protect. That all changed one fateful day, during a rescue operation deep in enemy territory. A grenade, hurled from a hidden position, exploded nearby. The blast was violent and chaotic. The shrapnel from the explosion spared his life but stole his sight. His eyes were damaged beyond repair, and with that loss, his world fell into darkness. Adjusting to this new reality was an uphill battle. The world he had once navigated with confidence and precision now felt like a foreign land. His sightless eyes had no place in a society that valued appearance, visual beauty, and outward signs of success. His military training had prepared him for physical combat, but nothing had prepared him for the emotional and psychological battle of living in darkness. Yet, Ethan was nothing if not resilient. His spirit was unbroken. He adapted, learning to use his other senses, his hearing, his touch, his sense of smell, to navigate the world. But as the years passed, society proved unforgiving. The job rejections piled up. Each no chipped away at his self-esteem. The world seemed to value sight over his intelligence, experience, and strength of character. His savings dwindled, and soon he was living on a modest pension. But Ethan found solace in small things. Morning walks with his service dog, Max, provided a semblance of normalcy. The comforting routine of volunteering at a local community center gave him a sense of purpose. There he shared his stories of survival, of brotherhood, of resilience. And as he told his stories, the listeners were inspired, uplifted by his unwavering strength. A week before the events at Le Royale, Ethan received an unexpected letter. It was an anonymous invitation to dine at the restaurant. At first, he dismissed it as a prank. Who would invite a blind veteran to such an exclusive place? But curiosity gnawed at him, and after some hesitation, he decided to go. It was an opportunity to step outside the confines of his routine and experience something different, something luxurious. But even as he stood at the threshold of the restaurant that night, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was out of place. As Ethan entered the restaurant, he was guided to his table by the maitre d'. It was situated near the grand piano, and the soft sound of the pianist's melody filled the air, a delicate counterpoint to the hum of whispered conversations. The waitstaff eyed him with curiosity and uncertainty, unsure of how to serve a blind man. As Ethan sat, the maitre d' handed him the menu, his hesitation palpable. He wasn't sure how Ethan would manage, or if he even needed the menu. Ethan chuckled softly, the sound carrying through the air. "I won't need it. Could you describe your signature dish to me?" he asked, his voice composed but with a hint of humor. The waiter hesitated before beginning, his voice tinged with discomfort. "Our signature dish is a delicate filet mignon, cooked to perfection and paired with a blend of truffle butter and roasted vegetables." As the waiter spoke, a group of diners across the room exchanged amused glances. One of them, a sharply dressed man with an air of superiority, leaned over to his companion and whispered loudly enough for others to hear. "What's the point? He can't even see it. How's he supposed to enjoy fine dining?" The words stung, and though Ethan tried to ignore them, a flicker of hurt crossed his face. But he quickly masked it with a calm demeanor, refusing to let their judgment affect him. The atmosphere in the room shifted, the tension thickening as more people tuned into the unfolding situation. Even the pianist's melody faltered for a brief moment, as if the music itself had sensed the discomfort in the air. Ethan took a deep breath, his voice carrying across the room with quiet authority. "Excuse me," he said, drawing the attention of every diner in the room. "I may not see the food, but I can taste it, appreciate its story, and understand the effort behind it. Can you say the same?" His words hung in the air, reverberating through the silence. The murmurs died down, and the room seemed to hold its breath. As the evening wore on, something shifted. The energy in the restaurant began to change. Where once there had been judgment and discomfort, now there was curiosity. Some patrons found themselves captivated by Ethan's quiet confidence. The chef, intrigued by Ethan's unshaken resolve, approached his table. "Mr. Harper, would you allow me to prepare something special for you tonight?" he asked, his tone respectful and earnest. "I'd be honored," Ethan replied, his voice sincere. The chef nodded and returned to the kitchen, determined to create something memorable, something that would challenge Ethan's expectations. Meanwhile, a young girl, perhaps no older than 6 or 7, approached Ethan's table. She tugged at her mother's hand, her wide eyes filled with curiosity. "Are you really blind?" she asked innocently. Her mother, mortified, began to pull her away, but Ethan smiled warmly. "Yes, I am," he said, lowering himself slightly to her level. "But that doesn't mean I can't enjoy life. In fact, it helps me see things differently, in ways that others might miss." The girl nodded, her innocence transformed into admiration. She looked up at her mother, who, despite her initial embarrassment, gave a small nod of approval. In that moment, the room seemed to soften, and for the first time, the patrons began to look at Ethan not with pity or disdain but with respect and curiosity. Moments later, the chef returned with a beautifully plated dish. "This is a blend of flavors from around the world," he explained. "A fusion of cultures, of stories." Ethan leaned in, inhaling deeply. "Smells like there's saffron and a hint of citrus," he guessed, his senses alive with the complexity of the aromas. The chef's eyes widened in surprise. "That's correct," he said, clearly impressed. Ethan took a bite, savoring the flavors as they danced on his tongue. His expression revealed pure delight. "This is remarkable," he said, his voice full of genuine appreciation. "The balance of flavors is exquisite. It's a story in every bite." The chef, moved by Ethan's sincere admiration, asked him to share more about his life. As Ethan spoke, the room seemed to quiet, and the other diners leaned in, captivated by his tales. He spoke of the bonds forged in wartime, of the comrades who had stood beside him in the face of death, and of the challenges he faced after the loss of his sight. His words painted vivid pictures in the minds of his listeners, and they saw him, not as a blind man, but as a warrior, a storyteller, a man of depth and resilience. As Ethan recounted his journey, he spoke of the importance of finding beauty in the small things, in the moments that others often overlooked. "Blindness may have taken my sight," he said, "but it gave me a deeper vision, a vision that allows me to see the world not just for what it is, but for what it could be." The sharply dressed man who had mocked Ethan earlier now sat quietly at his table, his expression contemplative. After a long pause, he stood up and walked over to Ethan's table. "I owe you an apology," he said, his voice sincere. "I judged you without understanding your story." Ethan nodded graciously. "We all have our moments," he replied, his tone warm. "What matters is what we learn from them." Just then, the maitre d' returned with an envelope. "This was left for you, Mr. Harper," he said. Ethan opened it slowly, his hands trembling slightly. Inside was a note. "Your bravery and kindness inspire us all. Tonight, your meal is on us. Thank you for your service." Tears welled up in Ethan's sightless eyes as the entire room erupted into applause. The pianist resumed playing, but this time, the melody was different. It was warm, uplifting, carrying a tone of celebration. A few patrons approached Ethan, shaking his hand and expressing their admiration. The atmosphere in the restaurant transformed from one of exclusivity to one of shared humanity, as if the walls that separated the haves from the have-nots had crumbled in an instant. As the night drew to a close, Ethan stood up, his heart swelling with gratitude. He had entered the restaurant feeling out of place, an outsider in a world that seemed worlds apart from his own. But now he felt different. He had left his mark on this room, on these people. The chef approached him one last time, his face beaming. "Ethan, we'd be honored to have you join us again. Perhaps as a guest speaker? Your story deserves to be heard." Ethan smiled, the possibilities unfolding before him. "I'd like that," he said. For the first time in years, he felt truly seen, not for his blindness, but for the man he was. As he exited the restaurant, guided by Max, his steps were lighter than when he entered. The city lights sparkled in the distance, but Ethan didn't need to see them. He felt their glow within him, a reminder that even in darkness, light could find its way. Ethan's journey from rejection to recognition, from isolation to connection, serves as a powerful reminder of the strength of the human spirit. It is a story of resilience, of embracing the unseen, and of finding beauty in the things that others often overlook. In a world that so often judges by appearances, Ethan showed everyone that there is much more to a person than what the eyes can see. If this story moved you, remember to share it with others. Together, we can change the way we see the world, one story at a time.